Distant flickering screen of scenery, a swear that's bringing it all back again. Great adventures, faces in condensation. I'm going outside to take it all in. You say too late to start, got your heart in a headlock. I don't believe any of it. You say too late to start with your heart in a headlock. You know you're better than this.
And the lights go out, and away we go. It's a terrible start from Crony, and he's bogged out, and he can't do anything. Slayer is challenging Luca into turn 1, and in this chance, he'll touch the podium, may even have a chance of winning, but Slayer has taken the lead at the minute. Up ahead, Harry Wink and Jaden are side by side. Jay will cross the line at the moment and lead, but he goes deep into the wall when Harry and Alec go through. Gan is trying to come on Jaden here. He's trying to get past the Ford against the Porsche. Gan has got past on the second to last lap. Leaderboard hasn't fixed itself, but it's both wide. Alec's going to get the jump. Alec is going to get the jump on both the cars into turn 1. They both locked up. They both went wide down the inside. A lot of features, but Lee won't win anything like this before. He's never won a championship, but today he will. Jaden, for the first ever time in his career, is the Formula 2 World Champion. Harry Wink will cross the line, and for the first ever time, Harry Wink is World Champion. So to say, it's an interesting day here at the Hockenheimring in Germany, and well, it's one that we didn't quite expect to have as much drama as it did. But there we have it. Ladies and gentlemen, of course, I'm your commentator, Teddy Mason. As usual, welcome back to the F1 Show. We haven't done this in a long time. But we're here now, and we're ready for the F1 Show. So, what is on the agenda for tonight's F1 Show? Well, we're gonna talk here in the booth for a few moments in the commentary gantry there, commentary studio. We're gonna adventure out into the pit lane, Ted Kravitz style, and we'll just talk about a few of the things that went on, and then we're gonna go to our version of the Skypad, and we're gonna have a look at some clips and some data, and we're just gonna analyze a few things, what could have happened, what is happening, and where everything has gone wrong, not only for the teams in this race, but the entire structure of the championship. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start out with the thing that we have been waiting for, the race finish. So, an interesting race to start off with. Germany, we come here every year and we expect something big, we expect changes to the championship, and that's exactly what we had this time around. So, personally, I didn't quite expect the podium that we had, in a way, but the podium that we had, well, happened. So, on top step of the podium was Harry Wink, and that's something we definitely didn't expect. And we can get the result up here on the screen right now. So, Harry Wink on the top step of the podium for Genesis. That's their first win this season, and that's something we definitely did not expect at all. They brought in upgrades and, well, paid off. Jaden, second. We expected Jaden to be on the podium. We expected him to be second. Jaden's right where we expected him to be. The only thing is we expected Gan to be ahead of him. Obviously, Gan DNFing from the session. Myself picking up Williams their first points podium as well. 2 in 1.
Gan obviously DNF for McLaren. That's his first DNF of the season. And then Max Forsawa DNF, first DNF, not first DNF of the season, but I believe second DNF of the season. So, but an interesting one today. Jaden Everett did not start the race. And we'll talk about why a little bit later. And we do have a visit from him as well. So we'll go ahead and speak to him a little bit later. But that is a shock surprise for us. BMW picking up 0 points in their home Grand Prix. And that means still that McLaren are the only team at the moment to have won their home Grand Prix. And to have picked up points in their home Grand Prix. BMW yet again failing. The German factory team failing to pick up points at their home Grand Prix. Mercedes did it last year and the year before. BMW doing it now. I think it's that German curse kicking in. Another thing that we didn't quite expect is Alec didn't start the race either for Genesis. And so that's 2 cars that we really didn't expect that didn't start the race. And obviously that will change the championship in the grand scheme of things. And this could be the turning point of the championship. We expected Monza to be the turning point of the championship. Nothing really happened in Monza. It wasn't that action-packed. Everything that happened in Monza, we kind of expected. It was a McLaren 1-2, BMW podium, and Williams almost got their first points of the season. The only thing that we didn't expect in Monza was that Genesis didn't pick up any points. Genesis didn't start the race in Monza, didn't pick up any points. Harry Wink picked up points here for Genesis. Alec didn't. So there's still a deficit that Genesis need to pick up at some point in the rest of the season. However, Austria up next though. Harry Wink, famous for his 3 wins in Austria last season. That could be the turning point for Genesis. And as long as they get a high position for both of their cars, that could undo the deficit that they've experienced here in Germany and Monza as well. We won't talk too much about Lotus and Williams because we do have a little conversation about them later in the session. But as always, no start for Zach and no start for Harry for Williams and the Lotus team. So 2 British teams there losing out on points as usual, and their deficit is large. So we'll bring that off the screen. And we'll go ahead and we'll just talk about Monza for a sec. So Monza, we didn't really talk much about Monza. We kind of brushed over it. It was an interesting weekend for Monza. As we said, Gan first, Jaden second. So it was McLaren 1-2. It's the 3rd time this season that the McLarens have finished 1-2. The only time was Silverstone and obviously here in Germany. So 3 out of 5 1-2s for McLaren, which is a pretty good record actually. I'm sure that's something that they'd be proud of. And that's something that they definitely could take on into the rest of the season. Nevertheless, definitely a solid weekend for McLaren in Monza for sure, especially since the fact that Jaden crashed out. Well, he didn't really crash out of his home race, but in terms of points, he crashed out of his home race. 0 points for Jaden in the Anglo Grand Prix, which meant McLaren only picked up 1 set of points in their home Grand Prix, which probably isn't exactly what they wanted to happen. But it's safe to say that in the last few races, McLaren, and Jaden as well, have definitely made up for that deficit. Obviously, there is still a deficit for Jaden, and we'll talk about what happened and why Anglo Grand Prix was so important to Jaden in a little bit. We're going to jump away from the commentary box then, and we're going to go into the pit lane as there's not much left to talk about here, as we can talk about it all in the pit lane. So, let's go ahead and wander over to the pit lane we'll go out of the back door here. Obviously, you've got the pits there, the Formula 2 pits, and the Porsche Cup garages. So then, we'll just walk over here. So the podium then, most of it packed up now. The 3 cars still there, obviously. You've got Harry Wink's Genesis car there, followed by the Williams and the McLaren of Jaden. So it was a P1 for Genesis's Harry Wink, the South Korean team and the South Korean driver, doing not exactly what we expected this weekend. It's their first win of the season, and it's Harry Wink's 4th win of his career. It's safe to say that Harry Wink has definitely established himself in the record book, that's for sure. He's not only broken the curse that Genesis have had in the last few races, he's broken Gan's winning streak. So 3 wins in a row for Gan. Qatar, Silverstone, and Monza. Hasn't won here in Germany. So that streak broken for Genesis's Harry Wink. And not only has he got that win, but obviously he's broke that curse. So that's something even better for him. Of course, in the grand scheme of things, he's now also moved up in the championship to P3, overtaking BMW's Jaden Everett. 62 points Harry Wink is on now compared to Jaden's 47. So that's definitely something that Genesis are to be proud of, and that's something that they've probably been working towards so far this season. As well, we've got the Williams number 20, which is obviously the wrong number in it. The Williams and the McLaren as well. So it's an interesting podium. It's definitely not what we expected, and safe to say that there could have been better. But overall, it's safe to say, and if I look at my notes here, what I wrote down is exactly correct. Good weekend for Genesis, a good weekend for Williams. It's an okay weekend for McLaren, and it's again yet another bad weekend for Sauber, and a crash out weekend for BMW. Their garage is shut up already because obviously Jaden didn't go out at all onto the track, so his car is still in the garage and their garage is shut because there's no reason for it to be open at this point. So it's safe to say that BMW were the fastest on paper. BMW and Williams basically brought in the exact same upgrades. Williams was slightly different to BMW's. Theirs was slightly, if you look on paper, they were slightly slower than what the BMW were predicted to be. So on paper, the BMW was the fastest. This could have been the golden opportunity for Jaden Everett and BMW, not only to get their first win of the season, but to get their first ever home Grand Prix win, and for that man, Jaden Everett, to get his first ever Capital Sports victory. And I know it's a stretch saying that all of this could have happened when it couldn't. We didn't know we could have predicted anything, and what we predicted didn't happen already, and we've seen that, so we already know our predictions aren't right. But honestly, if I could have predicted at the start of this weekend who would have won, I would have put my money on Jaden Everett. And if it wouldn't have been Jaden Everett, then it would have been one of the Genesis. They brought in the best upgrades this weekend, and we've seen that. They beat McLaren to that top step of the podium, Genesis. Had both Genesis cars been in the race and the BMW of Jaden Everett, my money would have been on Jaden Everett. The fastest car on paper out of everyone in the performance comparison stats, the BMW is the fastest car currently. For every other race, it's been tied with McLaren, and with Williams, but this time it was the standalone, outpaced, outbest car. It's a stretch to say that, and it's a gamble to say that he would have won had he been on the track. But if I had my life savings to bet on it, I would have bet on it. And for sure, that BMW easily could have won. If BMW had a second driver and they raced in the race today, they would have won. Hands down, easily. There was no competition. Jayden obviously did not start the Formula 1 race, and that's why none of this happened. But he attended 0 Formula 1 sessions this weekend. He was lined up to qualify yesterday, and qualifying obviously didn't happen. And because of that, he is attended 0 Formula 1 sessions this weekend. And realistically, that is not the best direction for Jayden to go. We've already seen once this year that Jayden hasn't started a race. He didn't start the race in Bahrain when he could have and he needed to. Jayden needed to start the race in Bahrain to open his scoring. Jayden, he would have been P3 in that race, and he would be P2 or P3 right now in the championship standings. He started and finished in Qatar. He started and finished in Silverstone. He started and finished in Monza, and he didn't start at all here in Germany. 2 races out of 5, Jayden has not started, and those 2 races could be detrimental to his end World Championship standings. So by the time we get to Indianapolis or COTA, wherever we decide to race in America this year, we'll come back to that fact and we'll have a look and see where he would be if he had finished those 2 races. We'll walk over to the McLaren garage now, and we'll go and just talk about them. Obviously, their garage is still open. The Gan's car is out back in the scrutineering pen, and obviously Jayden's is still sat over there. We still got a little bit of sunlight left, so we're good to go for a little while yet. But McLaren then. This is the first time that Gan hasn't been on the podium this season. P2 in Bahrain, P1 in Qatar, P1 in Silverstone, and P1 in Monza. It was a DNF for Gan, and he wasn't the first car to crash out of the race completely. Max was the first car to do that. He did that within the first 5 laps. Gan, I believe, didn't retire until around about after the first pit stops had completed. Around about lap 15, I believe, that Gan had dropped out of the race. So he hadn't dropped out of the race until later on after the first pit stops. So had he continued, especially since Jayden did make a second pit stop, Jayden made a pit stop for some reason later in the race, Gan could have ended up finishing ahead of Jayden. So it probably wasn't the wisest decision for Gan to DNF, but at the minute, that's not hurting his championship standings. This is obviously this is McLaren's second time that both cars haven't been on the podium. The first time was in Silverstone. Gan was lined up to be P1. Jayden was challenging as well in that race. It was probably going to be a McLaren 1-2. But Jayden DNF'd in Silverstone. So that meant that was the first non-McLaren 1-2 of the season. Obviously 1-2 in 1-2 in Bahrain, and there was a 1-2 in Monza as well. This time here in Germany, though, instead of what it was like in Silverstone, Gan was the one to DNF. First DNF of the season for Gan. He's been Mr. Consistent so far. He has been the most consistent driver, and that is a shock to consistency, really, for him. I'm sure he's not too concerned at this moment in time, but obviously for the stats page, that isn't the best. He's 4 out of 5 for finishes now, and he is the best driver so far this season. Well, he's actually on par with Jaden now. Jaden and Gan both 4 out of 5 finishes. 5 race starts, 4 finishes this season so far. It's a concerning weekend for McLaren as well, considering that they have had 0 upgrades brought to the car. Genesis, BMW, Williams all upgraded their car this weekend. McLaren brought their car from Monza and stuck it here on the Hockenheim track. I guess they expected results. In the end, it didn't happen because a massive R&D points handout came in before the weekend, so everyone upgraded their car. McLaren didn't even upgrade their car after quali. They lined up on the grid and then were questioning if they had even upgraded the car. They wasn't even sure. So when it got to the race, when it got to lights out, their car was the exact same as Monza, and by then there was nothing they could have done about it. In this performance chart, the development index for this weekend, they were indeed the 4th fastest car. Debatable, really. You could say that maybe the Genesis was slower, but on the development index this weekend, in terms of upgrade level, obviously on paper, McLaren were the 4th fastest car. Obviously, they were the 3rd fastest car on track, but on the development index overall, 4th fastest car. We'll go ahead and move down then to the Williams garage. The key team this week, and their first points of the season. A P3 finish for the Williams team, and that puts them still behind Sauber, because they've had a few points finishes this season in Bahrain and Qatar. Max finishing in P3 in Bahrain, first race of the season, and Slayer finishing P5 in Qatar to give Sauber those constructors points. So, but they are above Lotus now. So Lotus are the only team to have 0 race starts and 0 point finishes this season. And at the minute, they are on par to be the worst team this season and to tie off with Flexi and a few other teams in being the worst Formula 1 teams in capital sports. Lotus last season obviously did have points finishes at the start in Bahrain, in Bahrain and in Qatar. And then after that, well, it went AWOL because Jaden Everett left the Lotus team. But at the minute, they're on par for 0 points in the championship. In 2024, it was announced that Williams would join the grid and would replace the Toro Rosso team. And it's safe to say that at the minute, they are nowhere near on track to getting the same amount of points that Toro Rosso had last season. Last season for Toro Rosso was a brilliant start. Luca and Gambit led the way for that Toro Rosso team. That Toro Rosso car was the best on the grid, on par with the Ferrari of Slayer. And we come into this season, and that Williams car is a top performing car. It is one of the best cars on the grid. Yet there's no driver there to consistently, week in, week out, drive that car and give it the performance that it needs. And it's not the first time that we'll be saying that this season, I'm sure. But Williams, desperate times, but they have got points now, so it's interesting whether or not it will continue. there'll be change, but we'll have to wait and see. So next up then, Sauber, obviously their garage is still open because although Slayer's car isn't there, Max's car is indeed out the back again at the scrutineering, the DNF scrutineering part. So then Sauber, well, the less said about Sauber, the better. They've only had 2 recorded finishes this season from 3 race starts. P3 in Bahrain for Max, and it was a P5 in Qatar for Slayer, and that was round 1, round 2. So they were in round 1 the second fastest car. Well, actually, they were the third fastest car because BMW were up there, even though they didn't finish at all. They were the third fastest car. They've now, in theory, dropped down to the 5th fastest car, almost 4th. So they're surely there. But they've brought in 0 upgrades for this weekend in general. So they're one of the worst teams. That's for sure. So it's safe to say that the more Sauber hang out in the DNF places, the DNS places, they're not really going to go anywhere. I don't know what Sauber will do to turn the season around, if anything at all. But there is a possibility that maybe Max is wishing that he had just stayed with Williams at the end of the day. But we'd have to wait and see till the end of the season to talk about that one. Lotus is the next garage up in the pit lane, but I guess the less said about them, the better, really. It's their 3rd season in Formula 1. They joined late 2023. Well, they were registered as a team from the start, but they didn't start competing until late 2023. Racked up brilliant points finishes. They had a front row lockout in Dubai on their last race, and they finished the race 1 and 2. They had a podium in Singapore. Almost said Silverstone, definitely not Silverstone. They had a podium finish in Singapore, and that was Declan that finished on the podium in that one. That was a pretty decent race for Lotus. That was the 2nd race at that point. P2 for Declan finished nicely between Max and Gambit. And then obviously P in Korea was their first race. Korea was their first race of that season, so they they started competing 3 races to the end, and they racked up a P4, and the highest finish was P4, but they racked up a P4 and P5 in that race. So it meant that they had, in the end, after those 3 races, they had 104 championship points. And it meant that at the end of all of that, they ended up being the 3rd place team in the championship. So they went into 2024 being that 3rd place team, and they were lucky, so lucky. But then they made a scuffle of it in 2024, as we know, and well, it's safe to say at that point, the less spoke about Lotus, the better. Bahrain, they had 0 starts, 0 finishes. Then in Qatar, Jaden and Harry both competed in that race. P4, P6 for Lotus. And they were on par with the Marussia at that point as well. And then from round 4 onwards, they didn't score any points at all. They ended the season with 20 constructors points, and that put them dead last in the constructors order. And not much has changed from today. They're still dead last in the constructors order. So really, the less said about them, the better, because it's poor from the Lotus team. Genesis then. The big winners of this weekend. And it's outstanding to say that their car was unbelievable this weekend for Genesis. Absolutely brilliant. In the end, it's the best they could have wished for, really. And it means that after all of that, all of those tries, all those attempts to get podiums and race wins and really develop that car, it's finally paid off. We'll talk about Alec for a second here as well. Alec pulled out of the pit lane at the start of the race, and then didn't end up racing. So, because he didn't pull out, he didn't enter the starting grid, he didn't enter that starting lineup, meant he didn't even classify as a race starter. But had Alex started the race, he would have been contending for P1, could have even won. And this is what we were saying earlier when we said about the BMW and the Genesis bringing in upgrades. Had Alec raced and had Jaden raced, it would have been BMW P1 and then a Genesis P2, P3. And throughout that entire race, it would have been a battle between the BMW and the Genesis because the McLaren physically couldn't keep up. And if Williams hadn't even entered that race, they'd be sat on 0 points as well. But their car was good enough to compete for the race win. Williams, in theory, on paper, should have won against Genesis. But brilliant for Genesis. Like we said earlier, though, there is still a deficit of points that Genesis need to make up. They had 0 points finishes in Monza. Neither of the drivers for Genesis started the race in Monza. And that is something that they didn't want. That is something that they weren't expecting. And that's something that really dragged down their points. In the end, even with that points deficit, they do still sit P2 in the constructors. And after this race win here in Germany, Harry Winks sits P3 in the Drivers' World Championship. So that's something that they've definitely brought back. But we said again, there's a points deficit, and they need to make up that ground. Ideally with wins, P1s, P2s. So really, Genesis just need to carry on with their car development and continue going forward, because it means that by continuing that car development, it means that they can continue to challenge for that win, continue to challenge for that podium. And we saw that in Silverstone. It was a P2, P3 for Genesis, and that was their best finish of the season. Harry Wink now doing even better, P1. That is now their possible best finish of the season. It's safe to say that the pit lane is stacked this year, and it's safe to say that the competition is really, really large. But the only problem is that there is a continuing risk for all the other drivers that Gan will win the championship. At the minute, he is looking like the best driver. So what will his teammate and the other teams do to deny him of that championship that he so wants? We have to wait and see, but for now, at the minute, nothing really that they can do. we are going to go around the pit lane now. And we're just going to go head out back. And while we're here, let's talk about Formula 2. So, Formula 2, again, no feature race this weekend. There was no recorded Formula 2 feature race for this weekend. And it meant that, yet again, Monza, obviously, there were points given out in Monza. But it meant that there was only one recorded points finish this season, and that's not the first time that's happened now this season. In Monza, it was 0 points finishes. There was no sprint, there was no feature, and there was no quali. Here in Germany, there was no quali. There was a sprint, but there was no feature. In Bahrain and Qatar, of course, there was no qualies. In Silverstone, there was no quali and there was no sprint. So at the minute, it's not looking too positive for Formula 2. But while we're here, we will speak about the championship. Jaden leads the Formula 2 championship. Yet again, last year he won it. And he leads it again. 68 points currently is what Jaden stands on at the minute. Jay behind him for the Porsche team stands on 61 points. So 7 points separates the lead in Formula 2. And there is a few other cars that are slowly but surely catching the leaders as well. Invicta, they are far and away in the Constructors' lead, 117 points. They have 3 drivers in their team. Obviously, you're only allowed 2 to race at one time. But when 1 doesn't race or 2 doesn't race, there'll still be 1 there to pick up the points. So them having 3 drivers is good. And that really benefits them. However, even though having 3 drivers as well, benefits you in the Constructors, maybe having 1 consistent driver alone is good as well. Jaden, at the minute, for his Prima team, has picked up 68 out of 68 Constructors' points. Prima now sits second in the Formula 2 standings compared to Porsche on their 65. So 1 driver versus 2, the 1 driver wins. Jaden is doing better by himself in the Prima team than Jay and Harry are doing for Porsche. Interesting stuff there, that's for sure. Obviously, at the minute, Formula 2 are supporting every race that Formula 1 has gone to. That will end in Rivendell. Rivendell will be the final race that Formula 2 will support for a while. They'll have a little break and then come back for Korea and then Dubai. But for now, Formula 2 will be racing all the way up until Rivendell. Porsche Cup, not much to say about them really, but it is safe to say that the Porsche Cups have been testing. The Porsche Cup race will go ahead, obviously. So yeah, not much to say about the Porsche Cups. But Porsche Cups, they're well and alive. And they've been testing since Qatar. And the Porsche Cup season kicked off in Silverstone. So we'll go back here and we'll just go back to the track, the TAA pen here. And this is the little DNF pen, so we can see obviously Gan's car here and Max's car here. So Max retired within the first 5 laps of the race. Gan didn't retire until round about lap 14. Max brought his car back into the pits. But Gan just pulled over on the side of the track. I believe Gan pulled over at turn 4 and just parked it there and retired. So first retirement for Gan this season. And it is the first retirement for Max as well this season. In the 2 races he's started, he's 1 of 2 so far for points finishes. He retired here in Germany. He obviously finished the race in Bahrain. So he, at the minute, is 1 for 2 on race finishes. So I'm sure he's not too concerned about that, really. But it's safe to say that, you know, there is a lingering smell in the pit lane, and that smell is coming from Sauber. And it's safe to say that they're going to have to do something sooner or later, if they want to be able to challenge not only for a good championship spot, but even at this point, challenge for the championship. As we've seen, there's so many inconsistencies this season. Genesis didn't have any points in Monza. Jaden for BMW hasn't shown up to a few races already this year. Lotus, 0 points. Williams have only just picked up points. And McLaren, every few races, are having one car, DNF. So if Sauber could get their stuff together, they wouldn't be in this pen as much. They wouldn't be in the DNF pen. Their garage wouldn't be shut. They'd be in Parc Fermé with the rest of the cars in a podium finishing position. So really, if Sauber got themselves together, it's safe to say that they could be doing significantly well this year. They've got 2 World Championship drivers on the lineup for their team. They're the only team to have 2 World Championship drivers on their lineup this season. If they had it all together, if they had it all to play for at their hands, if R&D was better, if they had the car, they would be able to own the racetrack, that's for sure. We could see it for sure, definitely a better Sauber team this season. But what will they do? Will they just sit back and say the same? Or will they just sort themselves out? We don't know. We'll have to wait and see, that's for sure. So, we've almost come to the end of the F1 show, to be honest. There is a few more talking points to do. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So, bear with us a few moments, and we'll return to you in just a moment. So, ladies and gentlemen, we return to the conference booth, the commentary booth even, commentary studio, whatever you'd like to call it. I have to say, unfortunately, we don't have Jen here. For the interview for the F1 show, he's packed up his bags already and he's left Germany. But nevertheless, we do have a few more talking points just to go over. And then, well, we'll be ready to end. So I just want to start out by saying how quickly McLaren managed to get up to pace this season. Usually it's the case with, especially as we've seen with Jaden, how he owns teams, especially with Marussia. It took quite a while for him to get up to speed with Marussia. He definitely wasn't the fastest car, or didn't have the fastest team, but it's safe to say that by the start of the first race, in pre-season testing even, he was the fastest car. His team did have the fastest car on track, and it was safe to say that McLaren team is in the best position that they could be in. And for Jaden as a team principal, he'll be as happy as ever. It's not usual that we see a team get that up to speed that quickly unless they've had some kind of previous experience. And Jaden's only had one previous experience of owning an F1 team, which was Marussia last season. And it's safe to say that didn't go amazing. They did have a few points finishes at the start. They managed to somehow get pole in Monza when Amp got pole there. But towards the end of the season, they did start to end up getting more podiums, and Jaden ended up picking up his first ever race win for Marussia in the last race of the season at Dubai. There's evidence as well that the teams can't get up to speed, and that's with BMW really. With Mercedes and with Harry Wink owning the team, Mercedes were out in front. By halfway through the season, Mercedes were out in front. They were the top contender for the championship title, and they won the Constructors by a long mile. But it's safe to say, BMW, with Jaden now owning the team, going back to how it was in 2023 when he owned a Mercedes, but he now owns BMW, which is basically just the change Mercedes team. It's safe to say that he's not got that much experience with owning a Formula 1 team. So his experience doesn't translate into Jaden's experience. And Jaden is doing a significant job of managing that McLaren Formula 1 team. Although, yes, this weekend not being the best for him, but one weekend doesn't decide the entire championship. It doesn't decide everything. So it's safe to say that everything is still on the cards, and there is still everything to play for. I think pretty much here we can conclude the German Grand Prix weekend. It is a triple header, not for Formula 1. We have Porsche Cup, the Porsche Cup track day, whatever. We have the Porsche Cup TMEC race coming up next weekend. The special global TMEC race, the international one, the special event. So that's what makes this a triple header. So we have Germany this weekend, Porsche Cup next weekend in Mount Panorama Bathurst for the first time, and then we return for Formula 1 and Formula 2 in the Red Bull Ring Austria, Spielberg, which we're more than looking forward to. Of course, as usual, I was your commentator, Teddy Mace. Here, this was the F1 show. Thank you all so much for watching. We'll see you next weekend for the International Porsche Cup race. In Australia, mate. That was the worst impression ever. Thank you all. Good night.